Welcome, bienvenue, welcome once again to the IPSA kind of magic show, or IPSA kind of magic, depends on which side of the fence you're sitting, potato. Um, uh, and here we have, of course, stalwart of the show, Hamish McClay, who helped me set it up in the first place, and of course, friend of the show, Silas J. Lees of Wiki Whammers, a supplier, a supporter, a provider to other members of IPSA, and it should be said, a deep thinker amongst topics, particularly the one that we're going to talk about today. Deep breath. Climate awareness in property searches. There's a lot to be said for climate awareness. I'm aware of the climate, especially when it's raining, being bald. But particularly, we should be aware of how they affect property searches. And of course, it would be rude of me not to start the show off with Hamish McClay.
Good morning, afternoon, sorry. I just want to say, here comes the sun. Here in Oxfordshire, the sun has come out.
Hooray.
Quite appropriate, I suppose. And appropriate, too, that we have Silas with us today, because we are speaking about the subject of change. And when we actually speak about change, it's a little bit different with the title that we have. It's about weathering change, because we do need to change.
I see what you did there.
There is much happening. But what we need to do is to be aware of climate. It's very, very interesting. If you were to pick up a handful of a grain of sands from any of the beaches throughout this particular sort of country, that would represent the impact that this planet has on the total size of the universe, which is expanding rapidly as I speak. Whatever man does is of very little consequence, particularly to climate. There are things that we can do to, if you like, sort of reserve certain aspects of what's going on. But climate awareness is the important thing. And what we need to do is look at, there's change in the weather. And we cannot impact. We had ice ages. What the heck did man do to create ice ages? Well, good grief, he didn't do anything. Yeah. There weren't even dinosaurs then. I think the ice ages came before the dinosaurs even. So it is monitoring, it's watching the weather change. Now, what we have to do, certainly, is to accommodate the change in the type of rainfall we're currently experiencing. Remember, of course, the great damage and the whole of the earth was going to be totally annihilated by acid rain at one stage. What's happened to the acid rain? What did man do about that?
I think it turned into acid house, didn't it? I'm sure. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't remember those days, you, Gareth. I don't remember those. Mind you, I didn't indulge, but that's another story. But what it is, we are all of a sudden imposing upon certain people within society, particularly our conveyancing solicitors, and to trying to suggest that they need to be experts in climate. Now, how on earth can we suggest that they're going to be experts in climate if we don't understand it ourselves? We don't know that, the bills go up, the bills go down. What we can do is build accordingly, and we can actually accommodate certain aspects of what we're doing with building. We know there's an awful lot that we do with building-wise, which is damaging to the environment. Let's try and find a better way of doing that. However, I'm more in thinking that what we need to do when we look at property searches, which is what we do, the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents, we look to be providing searches on behalf of that end user, or in some cases on behalf of possibly somebody who's putting their property on the market. We gather information from the local authority, what information they have, what information they'll let us have, I should say. However, there's a heck of a lot more to a property than just what the local authority hold on that particular property. And we need to look at environment, because environment is actually changing. We do know that various things are happening that we weren't expecting. Did mention the rain, so there is a change there. But the various other things, and what we need to do, and this is where the change is, we need to look at property much more holistically than we are currently doing. And in order to do that, we need to bring together different people. Now, we can actually provide at IPSA, we can provide information in to whoever requires that particular information. Some of it is original in the sense that we will have researched that information and we will refine that information, but we can gather information for other people. But what we want to try and do is paint the whole picture. And this is why Silas is with us today, because he can actually sort of speak. We've been working on projects with Silas, various members of IPSA, and we're showing some really quite dramatic ways of gathering information remarkably quickly. But basically, I think it's probably best to leave things. Let's Silas explain to us what the big advantage is in giving people a better picture of the properties that they're actually going to be looking to go into, or indeed, if this whole switch comes about, this change comes about, when somebody wants to put their property on the market, what do you need to tell the buyer about that property?
Silas, welcome to the show. After, what is it now? I think 7 extinction events that counted in the world, none of which caused by humans, burning, eating, or farting, or whatever it is they're doing. There are various changes inside that are climate driven, whether or not we can change them or not. And part of searching, as Hamish has said, should make you aware of what the tendencies of both the local area and environmental change will have on the future of the property you're interested in, surely.
100% it will, absolutely, Gareth, and thank you for the welcome back. But from a point of view of the buying process of a property, the climate will potentially have an impact in terms of has the property been built on a floodplain? Is it subject to adverse weather events that could cause a knock-on impact? Now, of course, some of those events, if we go back to, I think it was it 2005, or when we had all that flooding, massive flooding, which is a sort of a 1 in 1,000 year event. Is that enough to stop somebody wanting to actually buy a property, or is that a freak occurrence that actually we were very unfortunate to be caught up in it, but it'll never happen again for our entire lifetime? Interestingly, I used to live in a place called Ironbridge, and frequently 2 or 3 times a year, the flood barriers would have to go up, and they'd try and keep the water out of all the properties. But one home about 100 yards from where I lived flooded 3 times a year, and they just learned to live with it. They couldn't get insurance. They just quarry tiled the whole of the downstairs and learned to live with it. But I think it's an important thing for people to understand the risks that they're getting into when they buy a property. But is it being caused by climate change, global boiling, global cooling, whatever the latest addendum is to that? I'm very, very pessimistic about that view. And I think we need to be careful not to go off down a path spending hundreds of millions of pounds trying to deal with something that fundamentally is going to happen whether humans intervene.
Yes, I think it's a bit like putting a sticking plaster on an amputation. It's hardly going to make much of a difference. Mm-hmm. And that is not obviating our need to try and live in a relatively clean environment. I don't think the pumping of raw sewage into our waterways is a good idea. I don't think that not trying to mitigate floodplains and enable people to live in relative comfort is a bad idea. But trying to fundamentally change the direction of weather patterns seems a bit King Canute style, if you know what I mean.
Very much so, I agree with that. I mean, if you look at some of the things that have been happening, when you and I were children, Gareth, you'd probably remember the road sweepers that would come along the roads and they make all that noise, emptying the drains and everything else. I mean, we've got drains outside here that are, full of gravel, full of dirt and muck. And the problem with that being, it sounds very simplistic, but you have surface water runoff that will happen every time it rains. Where's that water going to go? And if it can't get in the drains, it's going to appear probably in somebody's house or flood a road. Last year we had flooding, quite heavy flooding, I think it was in Chesterfield, and the surface water runoff was tremendous, and it couldn't go down the drain, so it congregated within the town centre, and millions of pounds worth of property damage has been caused. But could that have been avoided if the drains had been emptied? And you have to ask the questions: what are the councils doing with all the money? And why is that important service stopped? So
it does appear that rather than being King Canute against the waves, what we should be doing is looking for what is relatively going to affect buying searches at the point of searching. Am I right?
Yeah. So coming back to the home buying and selling process, if we're going to look at acquiring a home, you would need to understand what the risk is in terms of an event that would happen. Typically, it's flooding is the main one, but also environmental in terms of mining. I mean, there's been videos circulating recently of driveways just disappearing, collapsing, homes disappearing into a mine shaft, etc. Those are pretty major events that you would want to avoid when it comes to buying and selling a home. So the environmental, as Hamish touched on earlier, is an important search when it comes to understanding the likelihood of a property flooding. Now, your property might be listed within a flood zone, but again, where I used to live in Ironbridge, the property was 10 feet above the previous highs of the flooding. But on a map, it all looks as though, it's going to be engulfed with water every time it floods. But because of the elevation of the property, that would prevent it from flooding. So I think one of the issues that I see a lot in the conveyancing process is that a map is taken of a property that might be in a floodplain, but because the conveyancer doesn't visit the property, doesn't understand the relationship to the property being in a flood zone, but not actually flooding. Yeah.
Okay, so Hamish, it seems to me that I was hearing the other day from one of our friends that HIPS may be on its way back.
Well, I think it's an aspect of HIPS. There was, in effect, there wasn't anything wrong with the basic concept of HIPS. It was how the whole thing was handled, which caused the damage. And when you look at it, the demands of the Home Information Pack, it included such aspects. It didn't have a requirement for an environmental report. We didn't have the green daftery or the greenwashing type aspect at that particular. It wasn't mixing it up with energy. We were actually speaking about the environment and the impact on the environment. Energy is a totally different sort of subject.
Oh, absolutely.
Interestingly enough, it did include the EPC, but it also contained drainage and water searches. So what we're speaking about now, and why we bring it up involving IPSA kind of magic, is really what IPSA members do in terms of their provision of searches for the general public and for the solicitors they work with directly, and even more so now the estate agents that they can actually support because they can gather. Now the great thing is the particular word is the Association of Independent Personal Search Agents. We do not have an agenda. It doesn't say we have to have somebody's environmental report included in the packs that we provide. But this is really the route that all of our members like to go down. Let's provide a pack for people because it's a one-stop shop. It enables that solicitor to actually be able to, well, I don't need to go here. We know already that they've messed up the local searches because, first of all, they've split into two parts. You now go to land registry for one part of it, and because they don't know what their land charge is anyway, that's a bit unfair. I withdraw that. However, they do not have the same level of understanding as does the land charge officer as to the land charges, and they don't maintain the registers.
I've got a perception I want to throw at you. The way I perceive IPSA in the short time that I've been associated is you're a bit like the John Lewis of searching. John Lewis always prided themselves not on providing everything, but on providing what they perceive to be the most relevant and best of, and then creating a heavily coutured selection of things for you to choose from. And in a way, that's kind of the work you guys do, because rather than flooding it with everything, and the garden and the kitchen sink or the garden sink, maybe, I don't know. But you give them the stuff that really is going to help them make that decision.
Excellent comparison, actually, Gareth. Yes, I appreciate it. In fact, that's compared to the way I would have explained it, it'd take me another 10 minutes. So well done, Gareth. Well done, Gareth. It's exactly that. But it is a quality. It's almost a quality assurance because we are registered with the Property Codes Compliance Board. We know that. We're also regulated within ourselves because we have to, if you like, we have to engage effectively and sort of demonstrate how we can compile our searches to actually sort of get through the door to become a member of IPSA. But then what we've actually got is a tremendous platform that enables us to create that whole picture, not just to do with the environment, but so many other things. As Silas sort of mentioned, we could include, if we wanted, the mining report within the environmental search. That can be done. There's so much that can actually be put into all of these reports, which would enable, and it doesn't matter whether you're buying or selling, because the same information needs to be the seller of the information working normally, not always, but very often with an estate agent. They need to pass information to the estate agent to move the whole thing forward. Now, a lot of that information overlaps with, and in fact, I mean, Silas put the point, not when you actually go and look at a property, buyer beware. We know it's impractical to go and buy a property unless that there are other ways of investment where you don't need to. But I mean, that's a different story altogether. But if you're going to buy a property, and the best thing is to go take a look at it, but don't just rely on what the person that's selling it wants to tell you, because one would hope that they've got it right, but just have a little stroll around and have a word with a few of the neighbours.
I've got a keen viewer of the show, Christine, has asked, and this is a question I want to throw at each of you in turn. In the UK alone, nearly 30 dams have been removed, so it must surely be having an impact on flooding in areas nearby. Would dam removal be highlighted on local authority searches? To you first of all, Hamish.
Heavens no. They don't even say. We know for a fact they don't even include such matters as cladding complications. So if to speak something about the dams is complete, and of course one of the sad things as well, so much of this work has been taken away from people in the local authority. If you know what you're doing, you can find the local people who know about what's going on locally. However, it's been passed on to the Environment Agency. So a lot of the local people don't even know about it now. So this is where working with somebody who knows the area makes a significant difference to the whole thing.
Silas, what are your thoughts?
Well, just to piggyback on what Hamish has said, he's the expert, but as far as I'm aware, I've never seen any reference to that before. And it is an interesting point when we talk about flooding as a flood risk. If that dam has been removed, where's that water going?
It's going to go somewhere.
Got to go somewhere, exactly. And I think the other issue is allowing development on known flood plains, etc. And I think this is relating back to what Hamish was saying about the local knowledge. Many years ago, they built what was called the Black Country route through the West Midlands. And I remember my old man laughing as we were driving to work one day, saying they've not consulted any of the local people when they decided that we're going to put that route through. And there was so many mines that were underneath that particular area that they were just spending millions of pounds filling holes with concrete because somebody decided that's where the road was going to go, but hadn't done the investigation. So it's really important to have a thorough picture of what you're buying. And as to what you were saying earlier, Gareth, about what IPSA produce, from what I have seen, they are very much the gold standard, if you like, in searches. And I didn't know so much about the search market until I got talking to Hamish. But there's so many conflicts of interests between most search providers, if I can say that. And what I love about what Hamish has done with his team, he's built the independence into this very important aspect of buying and selling a home, and to have that transparency, but in a way that allows solicitors to have concise data to work with, not reams and reams and reams of information from a new housing development that was planned 20 years ago that they've got to filter through to find the needle in the haystack. Hamish's team has already done that. And so the data that arrives and the speed of execution, I mean, just as a quick anecdote, we did a very complex property recently with Hamish and his team. It was an unregistered title. It hadn't been sold since 1930 and God knows what else. 36 acres, I think it was. Country home, it should have taken months to get that data back. And working alongside Hamish and his team, we turned that around in less than 4 working days.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Speed of execution, ruthless, I would say, in terms of the execution. So that's what's possible working with the right team. And I think one of these major bottlenecks in the home buying selling process is the availability of comprehensive search data early enough in the process, and with material information coming into the fore, that should be a foregone conclusion that every estate agent should be plugging into IPSA to get their searches and then listing that alongside the property.
As we've often banged on this channel and other channels, I think you'll agree, Hamish and Silas, having the right team around you can make all the difference between success and dismal failure. Hamish, would you kindly take us home?
Well, I think there's very little to be added, to be perfectly honest. What you put together earlier, Gareth, the comparisons you made with John Lewis and what Silas has just spoken through is absolutely ideal. So I better contribute something as a matter of education to many people. And if I was to ask the question, what are suds? A lot of people will say, well, they're the sort of things you get when you mess around with the fairy liquid or whatever. Sorry, I shouldn't be promoting fairy liquid, but we just happen to have some in there.
Other watching fluids are available. Yeah.
You get loads of bubbles and loads of suds. We're not speaking about those because within the local authority search, it does ask the question about suds, which happens to be a sustainable drainage system. And many of you will have noticed when you actually see a developments being built these days, it happens with commercial properties as well. There's far, far more of these little balancing ponds appearing. Why have they put that there? To accommodate this extra water. And that could be, well, a great answer for Christine and saying, where is that extra water going from those particular dams? If they're actually going into these balancing sort of ponds, and you will notice they're called balance for good reason. They do go up and down. So there's something new to add to what Gareth and Silas have also put forward.
Well, once again, thank you very much for joining us today on IPSA Kind of Magic. Thank you so much, Hamish McClay of Search Convey, for his very useful and pointed information. Silas J. Lees for keeping us abreast of just how crazy the world is right now, and hopefully we've got a forward movement to move forward in. Thank you so much, Christine, for superb. Oh, that's so kind. There we go. Look at that. Example of superb collaboration. Yes, indeed, I would agree with that. And if you are interested in finding out more about IPSA, please go to their website. And it's not hard to find. Hamish, Heather, and the team will be more than delighted to help you out. Hamish is the current chairman, obviously, and also is an independent search agent himself. All the members of the team are in fact involved. The beauty of IPSA is only each agent specializes in their locality, and if you ask someone to do within IPSA to do a search and it's not within their locality, they will pass it to the right people to do the job. I mean, crazy, I know, but there you go. It's a non-competing organization, a fellowship, if you will, and it's all about all tides rising, all ships. Until next week, please keep your feet on the ground, keep reaching for the stars, hopefully keep your feet dry, and hopefully look after your mental health. Until next week, goodbye.